Yep. Hello everyone, like Andy said, my name is Kenneth, and my study and research was on the daily fantasy sports industry and looking into whether or not it was a game of skill or luck. And the importance of this is the whole legality of the industry basically comes down to whether or not it is viewed as a game of skill or luck. So a little background on the daily fantasy sports industry. In 2016, they gave out over $1 billion in prizes, and they are expected to give out more in 2017 than they did in 2016. FanDuel, which is the second largest daily fantasy sports provider behind DraftKings, was founded in 2009, and they reported in the first quarter of 2011 that they had 3,158 participants and earned a little over $1.35 million. And just 3 years later, in the fourth quarter of 2014, they had over 1 million participants and earned over $370 million, which is a 42% quarter-to-quarter growth during that time period. Also, FanDuel and DraftKings, as I mentioned, the two largest providers, spent a combined $200 million on advertising in a 2-month stretch between September 1st, 2015 and November 1st, 2015, including a combined $30 million in a 1-week period at the beginning of the NFL season. And this is kind of the time when the legality of the industry was called into question and came to the forefront. So the 10th Amendment gives each state the right to determine what is gambling and what is not. And each state uses one of 3 tests to determine this. These 3 tests are the predominant factor test, the material element test, and the any chance test. The predominant factor test is most commonly used by states, including the state of Pennsylvania. And the predominant factor test deems a game legal if it is seen that skill plays over a 50% role in the results for that contest. And as of August 4, 2016, 39 states still allowed the playing of daily fantasy sports, whereas 11 did not allow. And this was about 6-7 months ago. It's hard to try and get an exact number at any point in time because a lot of the times an attorney general will send out a cease and desist letter to the large providers and they'll kind of just ignore it and end up taking the states to court. So this number fluctuates a lot. Here you can see kind of an overview of how daily fantasy sports work. This is Yahoo Daily Fantasy Basketball, which is the provider and sport that my study used. You're given a salary cap that you have to create a combination of players that you have to stay under. The positions are, for Yahoo at least, the 5 main basketball positions: a point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, and center, as well as you get a guard position that can be filled by a point guard or shooting guard, a forward position that can be filled by a small forward or power forward, and a utility that can be filled by anyone. And on the other side, you can see the scoring, which that's basically standard scoring for any large daily fantasy sports provider. So to get to my study, the objectives of it were to recruit participants to take place in a 28-day study where each participant would be asked to fill out a preliminary survey to kind of gauge their overall knowledge of basketball in the NBA. The participants were then asked to submit a daily fantasy lineup every day for 28 days, and I took these results and analyzed them to try and determine whether or not daily fantasy sports is skill or luck. So here you can see the survey. It was just a quick 2-question survey. The first question involved asking them how much time they spend in the average week, either watching, researching basketball, seeing it on ESPN, different things like that. And the second question was asking them to compare themselves to the average fan on a scale of 1 to 5, where a 1 would be you pretty much know nothing about the NBA, probably couldn't name a player besides LeBron James. 3 would be the average fan. And 5 would be you're constantly watching games and you know a lot of advanced statistics about players. Here you can see the survey results for both the time and knowledge variable, time being the first question, knowledge the second. You can notice that the number of responses for each different from 1 to 5 are about the same from time to knowledge, and that's because most participants chose the same number for each one of the questions. Here is the time variable. On the graph is the average score for each one of the 26 participants over the 28-day period, plotted against their response. As you can see, as you go up the scale from 1 to 5, the 1s score about 220 to 240 on average, the 3s are around 250 to 260, and the 5s get into about the 270s. So you can see as you're going up the scale, the responses get higher and higher. And on the other side here, I calculated the correlation coefficient to see if there was a high or low correlation between the responses and average scores. And you can see the result was a 0.97 correlation, which is very close to 1, which is a perfect correlation. And almost the same exact things can be seen for the knowledge first score, where as you go up the scale, the average scores get higher and higher. And again, the correlation coefficient this time is a little higher. It's closer to 0.98. Again, very close to the one perfect correlation. So from that, we can see that on average, the higher responses yield the higher average scores. But does this necessarily mean that the higher responses are winning each daily fantasy contest individually? So I went and broke down each of the 28 days and saw the winners by response. And you can see someone that responded by either a 4 or 5 won over 85% of the daily contests, whereas a response of 1, 2, or 3 only won 4 of the 28 days. So the conclusions I drew from this is the graph of the residuals do show that as the responses go up, so do average scores. And this also goes into the high responses winning the majority of daily contests. So from all that, all the results, I came to the conclusion that daily fantasy sports do appear to be a game of skill. That's it. Thank you.